You know, one of the things that has really struck me about what's happening with this Halava case is the incredible amount of deception that has occurred and the flagrant attitude with which the state staffers of the Bishop Museum have tried to cover it up. Last week, Kalahui began to review about 500 documents that had been obtained from the DOT through the Freedom of Information statute. And I was just shocked in reading some of these correspondences. For instance, there's a letter there as the archaeological work began to progress and the material began to be assessed. There's a letter in the DOT files, communications sent by Ed Hush Puppy Hirata to Donald Duckworth, in which Hirata is saying, because of the nature of these finds, we've got to hush it up. Direct quote from the letter. If that isn't a cover-up, I really don't know what is. The other thing is, I think that the Bishop Museum, the state DOT, even the federal agencies are bending over backward to push through Inouye's military boondoggle, which will bring in millions, billions of dollars, really, hundreds of millions of dollars for the construction industry to pay off old campaign promises made by Inouye. But when we look at what is actually happening, this is really the second time that we've had a situation involving H3 in which a major heiau has been located. We have credible people who have documented that, people with the degrees, and what we have is Bishop Museum, the state, and OHA coming together. The example is Kukuyokane, saying that this is not a major heiau complex. In fact, it's an agricultural site. Once the site is totally destroyed, in order to try to rehabilitate their reputation, they then come out and say that they had made an incorrect assessment, and it really was a heiau. This time around, we have the same parties, the same freeway, doing the same thing, but thanks to a handful of brave women and many vigilant community activists, we have been able to put a stop to it. As far as the trustees of OHA appearing to be uninformed, I think that that's true, and that's pretty much the way that OHA operates on all issues. But in this case, it was very interesting when I reviewed the file to see that months ago, the Reverend Leon Sterling of Kona sent a letter to Trustee Kamaki Kanahele explaining the significance of the area and saying that OHA needed to move ahead to kapu the entire valley in order to protect it. Kanahele did not bring the letter to the appropriate committee, did not bring the letter to the attention of the Board of Trustees, but in fact swept it under the rug. And he's developing quite a reputation as being an apologist for HVB and the state on this and many other issues. The fact is, though, is that there was at least one trustee who was well aware of what was going on, and Kamaki Kanahele did what he could to bury that letter to make sure that nothing would be done. I think we were all shocked at the most recent hearing held by Tungpalan to hear Clayton He say that OHA had somehow retained the Center for Hawaiian Studies to do their research. But I tell you, this is classic Clayton He. I've seen him on many instances just create a false statement, shibai, in front of a political committee at the legislature. He's on the spot. Suddenly, there's a contract created between OHA and the Center for Hawaiian Studies. We know it's false. There hasn't even been a contract discussed. The hearing was over a week ago. We still haven't heard from them over at the Center for Hawaiian Studies. Clearly, shibai made at a public hearing before the legislature in order to doctor the record, to make it appear as though OHA is trying to do something when in fact they are not. But you know, the situation is really it really demonstrates the way that the state works and the amount of deception that they practice. And just as a last comment, I wanted to say that the most shocking thing to me was reading the testimony of the first hearing and finding out that there were professional people employed to do a job. When they made discoveries and tried to report it, one man was punched in the face, another woman was slapped. They were physically assaulted because they came forward with information. Needless to say, neither of them are currently working with them, but that's a violation of the law. That's a violation of the penal code and certainly of the employment code for conduct, but they get away with it.
Yeah, let me just say that these people were working for the Bishop Museum, so in case the listening public is saying where right, one was punched and one was slapped, and they were there. They were there at the hearing. They gave their testimony in writing to Senator Tungpalan. And for those of you who would like to confirm this. I encourage you to call her office and ask for the transcripts from the first, or the testimony, I should say, from the first Tungpalan hearing on H3, informational hearing, because you will be absolutely shocked at what has been going on at Bishop Museum. This has nothing to do with Barry. The firing of Barry came long after these complaints, and two of these are literally shocking. I mean, they're beyond eye-openers. You will be stunned when you read what has been going on. And at the second hearing, or was it the first hearing? I can't remember now. A man came up and talked about how he had been told to go down and buy alcohol and bring it up for some of the people at the museum so they could drink
at the archaeological site.
At the site, and it was. In the middle of the day. So I guess the stress is getting to them for good reason,
John,
too.
Yeah, well, you look at the whole history of this TH3 issue. Yeah. It's been around, 20 years?
So old that you still call it TH3.
No, everybody calls it H3 now.
Right. They had to get a special act of Congress.
Yes,
they had to get all the 50 states involved. I think this is the only project in the country they waived the EIS requirement.
NEPA. National Environmental Protection Act. Yep.
In order to do this project. And when you look at how the cost overruns for Bishop Museum are incredible.
Right.
But you look at what this whole project's going to cost. And the initial premise was that it was a defense highway connecting Pearl Harbor with Kaneohe, because we have a Cold War going on. In case of nuclear war, you may want to bust nuclear missiles there and shoot them from there.
Look what's happened.
But
we don't have a Cold War anymore.
I was wondering, Mililani, when you looked at all the files, did you find $3.3 million worth of work?
It seemed to me like I found $3.3 million of paperwork relating to a cover-up. But when I look at this, the sacrifice, the lack of professionalism, the deception on the part of the state agencies, Bishop Museum, the thing is to push through in this campaign year for Senator Dan Inouye, a military highway at this cost. The attitude they have is, if we have to cover it up, if we have to violate the law, if we have to slap a few heads, and if we have to sacrifice 80% of the professional staff of the Bishop Museum, we're going to make that sacrifice for Inouye's military freeway. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Before I do, we've had a lot of calls. I can't get to all of them, or we wouldn't get to the rest of the subjects for the show. I love this one. You're fanning the flame. Presumably also that you're stirring up trouble with the Bishop Museum. We should let the Bishop Museum proceed and do its work. And so
I think we should let the Bishop Museum die a natural death. I just wish that it would hurry up.